Hello, this is Miss Allie, Accounting 1, and this is Chapter 12. We're talking about payroll and how to pay your employees properly. So with this, we are doing the Work Together 12-1. It's on page 350 in your book. And the first thing it tells us here is that we have a time card for this Alice Webster, and we have to figure out how many hours she worked. Regular hours and overtime hours, because here in the instructions it tells that any hours over 8 hours per day or 40 hours per week are considered overtime. Okay? When it's overtime, she gets paid time and a half. Her wage is time and a half for those hours that she works overtime. Okay, so I'll position this like this, and I'm going to use, for right now, I'm going to use my pen and write in how we figure this out. So she clocked in at 7:54, and if you look at an analog clock, a round clock, you know that that's 8 o'clock in the morning. And then she clocked out at 11:57, which essentially, looking at the clock, is noon. It's 12 o'clock. So she worked from 8 to noon, 8 to 12, and that is 4 hours. And I do count on my fingers when I do this. Okay, it's not a it's you can do it. So she clocked out at noon here to go to lunch, and clocked back in at 12:56, which essentially is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She worked until 5:02, which you round it to 5 o'clock. So she worked from 1 to 5. So that's another 4 hours. That's how we got 8 hours here. She worked 4 in the morning and then 4 after lunch, and she got 8 hours. So here she worked 8 hours, or she worked from 8 again to 12. 11:53 is essentially 12 o'clock, noon. And then she came back and she worked from 1:06 to 5. That's also 4 hours. Wednesday she worked from 5:56 to 12:01. That's 4 hours. And then she worked from 1 to 5. That's 4 hours. Thursday she had a long day. Look at this. She didn't clock out until 9:30. But she did not work from 8 o'clock in the morning until 9:30. So we have to take her breaks out. So she worked from 8 to noon, and then she worked from 1 to 5. Then she worked from 6 to 9:30. 6 to 9:30 is 3.5 hours. Okay. Friday, she didn't come in the morning. She came in at 1 and worked to 5. That's 4 hours. And then she worked from 6 to 10. So that's another 4 hours. So she actually got 8 hours in on Friday, but didn't come in until 1 o'clock. Now, for jobs where you have to clock in, these are hourly employees, you get paid the rate by how many hours you work. And if it's retail or if it's restaurants or whatever kind of business it is, there are times when you could work any time of the day or night like this. All right. Cashiers, I know that they have a lot of different shifts at grocery stores or wherever. Places like Target and Walmart and Walgreens have people who come in and just stock the shelves. And so that could be late in the afternoon or the evening. On Monday here, she worked from 8 to noon. And again, if you need to look at an analog clock to be able to see how close these are or picture it in your mind, do that and use your fingers too. And the afternoon, she worked from 1 to 5. So that was 4 hours. Tuesday, she worked from 8 to noon. And from 1 to 6. Pay attention, she worked till 6. So from 1 to 6, is actually 5 hours. We're going to take care of that over here. Wednesday, she worked from 8 to noon, 8 to 12, and then 1 to 5. And then Thursday, she worked from 8 to 12, and from 1 to 5. Friday, she worked from 8 to 1. 8 to 1 is 5 hours. She took her lunch late, an hour later than normal. She came back at 2 and she still got off at 5, so she got 3 hours in after her lunch. Saturday, she worked from 10 to 1. 10, 11, 12, 1. She worked 3 hours. Monday, she worked 8 to 12, 1 to 5. All right, again, like I said, if you need an analog clock to help you with this, please pull it out. Please look at it. But when it's 12:59, that's really 1 o'clock. When it's 2:02, that's really 2 o'clock. Okay? Now, we're going to go back up here and put her time in. So she had 4 plus 4, she had 8 hours here. 4 plus 4, she had 8 hours here. This day she had 4 plus 4 plus 3.5. But she works 8-hour days as regular hours. And then anything over for that day is considered overtime. Okay? Friday she worked 4 plus 4. She worked 8 hours. Monday she worked 4 plus 4. So she worked 4 hours, or 8 hours. Tuesday she worked 4 plus 5. Now she worked 8 regular hours and 1 overtime hour. Wednesday she worked 4 plus 4. So that's 8. Thursday she worked 4 plus 4. That's 8. Friday she worked 5 plus 3. That's also 8. Saturday she worked 3. Now, right now, look, she worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So this Saturday is overtime hours because she worked her 40 hours. 8 days, or 8 hours, 5 days a week is 40 hours. Okay? So that Saturday was overtime. Monday, she worked 4 plus 4, which is 8. And they said that her work weeks start on Monday. So that's why we have to put that here. So now we have to total down the column. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 days at 8 hours. So I multiply those, and she has, or I add them all the way down. Either way you want to do it. It's 88 hours. Then add up her overtime, 3.5 hours, 1 hour, and 3 hours. So she had 7.5 overtime hours. All I did was add down the column for both of those. Add down the column. Okay. Now I'm going to, I hope you got all that. I got to erase all this stuff because we don't want that on the next one. But I wanted to show you how I was going through that and how to do that. So let's now grade step 1. And we got green checks all the way down. Green checks all the way down. Now, remember, this is your payroll. These are paying your employees. Paying your employees. So you want to get it right. You don't want to mess with their money. If you don't give them enough money that they're due, that's a crime, for one. But 2, they might not make their mortgage payment, their rent payment. They might not pay their electricity. So you got to make sure that you get their numbers right. Now here's the time card we just did, and here's the total hours down here for Alice. This step 2 is where we're going to find out the dollar amounts. These were just hours. Now we're going to find out the dollar amounts that Alice gets paid and these other employees. So it says for each employee, calculate the amount of regular, overtime, and total earnings. Overtime hours are paid at 1.5 times the regular rate. Round the dollar amounts to the nearest cent. So if you'll notice, they gave us the regular hours and overtime hours for employee 1, 2, 3. Alice up here is employee 4. So we got to fill in how much she had in her hours. We have to fill that in down here. So she had 88 regular hours and she had 7.5 overtime hours. Okay, so now we're just going to do some math. Hope you have your calculator. Okay, and I'm going to show this to you again with my pen. All right, I'm going to show you how this works. Okay, so you'll notice that employee number 1 makes $9 an hour. Okay, so just multiply 80 hours times 9 to get your regular pay. And employee 2 is 80 hours times 1250 to get your regular hours. And employee 3 is 70 hours times your 975 to get the regular hours. All right. And then Alice with her 88 hours times 11 hours or $11, she gets $11 per hour, and that's going to give you your regular pay. Okay. So let's do those. So here, $9 times 80 hours. This is $720. $720. Now, regular pay for employee number 2 is 80 hours times $12.50. So that's $1,000 even. Employee number 3 had 70 hours at $9.75. That's $6.82.50. We're talking about dollars here. Okay, so we've just taken their hours times their rate and found out how much they get paid for their regular hours. Now, Alice had 88 hours times $11. So that I got $9.68. Okay, so if you got that, we just did, that was just multiplication. Hours times rate. So I'll put over here, man, this just doesn't write well. Okay, so all you did was regular times rate. Your hours times your rate. Now, here's what happens next with overtime. Overtime, they get 1.5 times the hours times the rate. 1.5 times the hours times the rate. Employee 3 didn't have any overtime hours, so we're not going to worry about them. Alice had overtime hours. 1.5 times the rate times the hours. And that's going to give you this number. Okay, so let's do that real quick. So I'm over here at overtime for employee number 1. 1.5 times 5 hours times $9 an hour. So this overtime is $67.50. Employee number 2, 1.5 times 3 hours times $12.50. $56.25. That third employee didn't have any overtime. We don't have to worry about that. And then Alice, 1.5 times 7.5 hours times $11, and her overtime pay is $123.75. Okay, now I'm going to show you a little something here too. Make sure you understand this. Overtime. You take the rate. Okay, so for this first one, it's $9 regular rate. But when this employee works overtime, all of those overtime hours are worth, they get paid at a rate of $13.50. These are only overtime hours. Their regular hours you see here, they get, this employee number 1 gets paid $9 an hour for regular. But if they get over 40 hours a week, they get $13.50 an hour. All right. So employees who are hourly, they like to get to this point because they're making a lot more money per hour if your employer will allow you to do that. Okay, some employers, they're really tight on their payroll budget and they won't let you take any overtime. Again, this is only for people who work on an hourly basis. Salaried people get paid the same rate all the time, regardless of how many hours they put in. Their job is to get the job done, and they get the same amount all the time. Okay. Now there are advantages and disadvantages to both ways. I'm not going to lie to you on that. There are advantages and disadvantages to both types of payment. All right. So now I want to show you what happens next. Next, oh, that doesn't show up too well, does it? Well, we're going to add these two together. We add these two together to find out what the total earnings are for the employee. Now, this is called total earnings. It's also called gross. And that writing looks gross. All right. Gross earnings. This means we have not taken any taxes out yet, or Social Security, or any of that kind of stuff. So this is total earnings. This is gross earnings. And folks, I'm sorry, but you don't get to take this home. They have to take the taxes out and all of that good stuff. So now we're going to find out total earnings for employee 1. We add 720 plus 67.50, 787 and 50 cents. All right, and then employee number 2 would be 1,056.25. Employee 3 is going to be 682 and 50 cents. And our Alice, employee number 4, going to add her regular pay plus her overtime pay. And I got $1,091.75. Okay. So that's how you figure out how much a person gets paid on an hourly basis. There are lots of jobs out there to do this. This is all people do, is they do payroll. There are businesses that all they do is payroll for all kinds of small businesses. All right. But this is just the part where we get to find out what their gross earnings are. Next in the book, we will continue on that. But let's look at our answers and see what we got here. Oh, I got to erase all this drawing stuff. Erase all my drawing. Okay. And we go down here. And look, we got check, check, checks. So they liked what we did. Okay. So that's how you do the time cards. And I'll see you next time. Stay safe, stay well. Bye.